progressively, I guess, darker in the stories. I did preface we'd talk about guns. Um, I've got several different stories I'm going to talk about guns with. I mean, they are prevalent, especially here in Arizona. The right to keep and bear arms is alive and well, and certainly it is a part of our daily life. Usually we don't see it, but they're often there one way or another. So I've got four different types of stories involving guns to talk about. And the first one is about patrol or other volunteers in the community that might be armed. And this was going back to Florida again, another highlight from that wonderful state. Um, I looked it up today. I can't believe it was that long ago. It was 2012 when Trayvon Martin was shot by and killed by George Zimmerman. And George Zimmerman, while not on the board, not even on a committee, he was at least on the radar of the board of that community, who was aware that there were some safety issues in the community and maybe nodded and smiled at him at some board meeting where he made some comment in the owners forum that he would be out patrolling or doing whatever it was he was going to do. And much like the snake instance, here there was $1 million payout to Trayvon Martin's family for the wrongful death claim. The association didn't say don't do it, or you're not, don't do that for us, or hey, let's make sure that you're not carrying a firearm. They didn't do anything to exert control over him. And this may seem like a one-off to you, like one of those extraordinary stories that, happen elsewhere. I don't know about any of you or your communities or what Jeff may have seen with any of his communities, but I will tell you, I know it happens a lot out there. I had a colleague whose father was on a board in a 55 plus community in Phoenix, and he drove around all the time in his golf cart, packing open carry, packing a weapon, and stopping people and talking to them. And of course, he thought, the dad, I'm sure, felt he was in control. No big deal. I know how to use a weapon. Okay, and nothing happened there. But I've got a couple of clients here in Tucson that have done the same thing or don't even think about it. I recently had a client uh, say to me that they had not just not just that people were patrolling, but the association had actually purchased a vehicle with lights on it and patrol signs on it, and they had random volunteers driving it. They didn't background check anyone. They never asked whether these people were carrying weapons. They didn't train them in any way. They just said, "Hey, Fred, here's the car. You're on duty this Friday night." And it it boggles my mind that um, they would be turned loose like that. And certainly, it's the sort of nightmare thing that attorneys and insurance brokers uh, lose sleep about. Thankfully, here in Southern Arizona, we've not had any incidents, but it does happen. And you need to know if people are out there doing this in your community, and you need to distance yourself from them. It is not an association function to provide security. Um, what do associations do? What's your job as a board member? As I say over and over, there are two things that you do. You maintain common property if you have any, and most of you do, but not all do. And you enforce the use restrictions. That's the job of an association. Providing security is just not one of those things. It's not something you're well equipped to provide. That is what law enforcement is for. If you truly believe that you need security, then hire licensed security professionals to serve your community. Even then, though, I personally would recommend against it, because if you've hired professionals, you've sort of bought the obligation. You've said, we think it's an association function to provide security. We've taken your assessment dollars, hired security professionals, and we're doing something about this perceived risk in the community. But guess what? You do that and you do it with the best of intentions. But when someone's assaulted or has a home invasion or a burglary, they're going to say, you should have done a better job providing security. You're going to be on the hook for those problems now that owner experienced, rather than saying, hey, you know what, we enforce use restrictions. You got problems with burglars or something like that. You need to deal with law enforcement. You need to provide security at your own house. That's not what we do. So I get why boards often think that it's part of their job because you feel like a local government. But that is something that I think should scare everyone in the industry, is if people are taking the law into their own hands with a firearm, especially. All right. Self-help confrontation. A real incident some years back now, actually far back. It was before the Great Recession, when self-help had its heyday during the Great Recession. But before the Great Recession, I had a client that just couldn't get a property owner to take care of the weeds. It was a true jungle in the yard, and they had tried and tried. They followed our advice to give multiple notices to the owner that they were planning to use what we call self-help. Most CC&Rs say you give the owner notice, you can go onto the property. Essentially, you have an easement to go onto the property and correct the violation. That's what we call self-help. And this community had it. They gave the owner lots of notice, still didn't get any response. So they sent in the landscape crew. Well, the landscape crew was met with a shotgun on the lot and run off. Get off my weedy lawn. And thankfully, of course, no shots were fired. But it does make you think, well, how close might we have been to having potentially someone on the landscape vendor's crew shot and killed because we wanted to get rid of weeds in somebody's yard. I don't have any information really on what was going on with the individual that came out of the house with the gun. I don't know if they were inebriated, if they had mental health issues or anger issues. I don't know what was going on, but that is the poster story for why we have to be careful about using self-help. Then the Great Recession came along and there were lots of vacant properties and people got really comfortable with doing self-help. I don't know that it's that common today, mostly because we don't have a lot of vacant properties, and self-help really isn't a very useful tool beyond some minor landscape maintenance anyway. People don't typically threaten to go paint your house or replace your roof or do anything like that because it's expensive, and so it doesn't happen a lot. But if you do have particularly landscape issues, this is a tool at least to think about. My advice and management's recommendations probably are be very careful about it. Try to do it in other ways if you can. Unfortunately, if they're really dug in, they're not going to cooperate. You're really left with the choice between doing self-help or hiring a lawyer. And I know you all don't like to do that just to get people to pull their weeds, but that's the tough decision that the board may have to make in some cases. All right, guns at board meetings. I am not a Second Amendment expert, but I know enough, at least as it applies to property rights. And as a property owner, you have a right to tell someone if they come on your property that they can't have a weapon, right? I think you all can appreciate that. If someone comes over to your house and they're carrying their AK-47, you can say, hey, leave it in the car, leave it at home. I don't want that in my house. All right, that's your property right that trumps whatever Second Amendment right that person may have. I hope all of you agree with that simple scenario. Um, and it's the same thing when it applies to board meetings. If it's at your clubhouse or common area, or whether it's at the local church or library branch, um, you have in the latter case, if it's the library or church or fire station, you've reserved that property for your corporate purposes. It is in your control as the board. You get to set the rules under which people can come to your property at that time. Certainly, you can do it at the clubhouse or the pool. It is your property, just like you can prohibit smoking or prohibit people from using the pool after 10 p.m. or whatever it is. You get to set the rules about having weapons on the common area. Not too many clients actually bother to do this. Mostly, I think it's not an issue. It doesn't cross people's minds until it does become an issue. And there have been, unfortunately, situations where angry owners are showing up at board meetings, brandishing. I mean, maybe it's not in their hand, but at least on them, visible as a means of threatening the board. It's not a direct threat necessarily to be shot, but it makes people uncomfortable. It most certainly does. Now, I also have had boards a specific board I'm thinking of that did not want to adopt a rule to prohibit guns at board meetings, even though they had an owner who was doing exactly that. It turns out there were board members that were concealed carrying and they wanted to protect themselves and they weren't going to give up their guns at the meetings. But what they did do was hire uniformed off-duty police officer to be at every single one of their board meetings. And they've been doing that for a couple of years because they have a few owners that seem potentially unhinged and they do carry their weapons around. One of them, even when she left a board meeting after getting a bit out of control, um, there's there are big picture windows at this clubhouse, and she walked up to the glass and licked the glass while everyone, including the off-duty officer, were watching her. So yeah, there are some people who aren't necessarily playing out of the same playbook as us, and we have to be mindful of that and careful about that. Um, there unfortunately have been shootings at board meetings, but it's been a long, long time here in Arizona. It was just a couple of years ago that I think it was in Kentucky, in Louisville, where there was uh, shots fired and someone killed at a board meeting. Um, anyway, that's sort of the dark side of things. People aren't typically warm and fuzzy about their associations. Most of what you get are the malcontents, the people that aren't happy with what's going on in the community. And unfortunately, at times, that can be a risk that you've taken by being on the board. I suppose virtual meetings go a long way towards providing that protection, though, at least some measure of safety. All right. The final story with respect to guns. Um, I have a big client that has um, lots of amenities, right? Golf course, restaurant type things. And they had a resident. This is also a 55 plus community, um, as those communities tend to be. But they had a resident there who liked to drink too much, and unbeknownst to us as the attorneys, um, the first incident involved dating an employee of the association that worked at one of the facilities. But when she broke it off, he called her at work and threatened to shoot her. And she, of course, was scared. She reported up the chain of command, and it was kind of written up to, oh, he's drunk. It's a love spat, not association business. At least that was what was in the client's mind at the time, I think. A few weeks pass. There's an incident in the restaurant where this same resident, too much to drink by noon, even, and threatened to shoot and kill in front of a room full of people, a couple of people sitting at a table there. And then the board thought, maybe we should call Jason. I don't know what to do with this. It's starting to feel uncomfortable, which it should have been uncomfortable. And unfortunately, we're left with no other choice but to not just ban him from the common area, but to get an injunction from court prohibiting him from coming to the common area and prohibiting him from having access to a weapon because he had threatened to shoot people. Again, sad state of affairs that it sometimes comes to this, but we did go to court and get a court injunction against him. Injunctions against harassment in Arizona, I assume in other states as well, but here anyway, if there have been threats with a weapon, you can get an order from the court that they turn over their weapons while the injunction is in place. It's not really as easy to accomplish, but at least you have a court order saying that the guy in his more sober moments was profusely apologetic and said he was just drunk or he didn't mean it, whatever. But you simply can't turn away from that. If someone had gotten shot, it would have been the $5 million settlement from the association because they would have done, if they had done nothing to intervene, right? We had to get the court order, not because that was necessarily going to stop him from doing what he had threatened to do, but we could then say to the surviving family members, what else could we have done? We prohibited him from coming to the common area. We got court order to tell him not to do it and to surrender his weapons. We couldn't do anything else. I mean, we can't bust down his door and search his house and take his weapons. So that is, unfortunately, the world we live in, and that is what the association had to do. I guess the overarching lesson here, you're not in the business of providing security, but you still must keep your common area safe at least. You're not responsible for the security of individuals' homes, but you do have to keep your common area safe. And when you know that there is a real risk, an unusual risk of someone being injured, you do have to do something. All right, we're doing all right on time. Still no questions. We can take them at the end too. Not necessarily as dark of a topic, but one that is going to be frustrating and one that you're almost certainly going to have to deal with in your association is insurance. If you're paying any attention at your association level or in the media, maybe even with your personal auto or home insurance, it's crazy out there. The cost has gone through the roof in many cases. I've got a condominium client that has zero insurance at the moment. It's not that they can't afford it, they cannot get it. No insurance company is willing to insure them. And their last big loss was a storm last year's monsoon of 23 with some work that still isn't complete, but they simply cannot get insurance. What does that mean if you own a condominium or townhome where the association cannot get insurance? And that's any insurance, whether it's for the property, D&O insurance, they cannot get insurance. And what that means is that the individuals in the association may be personally responsible if there is a large claim. Um, you do have a corporation to try to protect yourselves from that risk. That is why you incorporate. That's why you have boards of directors. But it is unfortunately a possibility that if there is a great loss, you're going to have to pay for it out of pocket. Um, I mean, if this association if this association um, does have another catastrophic loss with the storm, um, they're going to have to find a way to come up with the money despite what limits they may have in their documents on raising assessments. Um, I also had an association that had their premiums quintupled from one year to the next and have had to impose special assessments just to pay for insurance. Other clients with um, not property claims, something I don't know what kind of associations most of you are in, but most associations are single family detached homes where the insurance that you're going to be concerned about as the association is directors and officers insurance. And historically, um, whenever an owner would make a claim against the association, you get, and by claim, let me be clear, claim is a defined insurance term. That's a threat of a legal claim in writing. I'm going to sue you. If it's in writing, that's a claim under your insurance policy. And historically, our position has been you notify insurance every time you get a written threat because if you don't promptly tell them about the possibility in 3 months, if you get sued and you didn't tell them, they may say, we're not covering it. We have no obligation. You have a duty under your insurance contract to promptly notify them. That may be their out. So we regularly would just send every written notice to your agent or broker and say, crazy Sally, she made another threat again, so here's the email. Um, now I'm a little less certain about that. I mean, I think we still have to notify them because you have to preserve your right, but now we have to have hard discussions about the risk because if you take a claim that let's just say Arizona Department of Real Estate claims, they are not that hard um, to defend. There's not a they're very narrow disputes, and the real penalty is you may have to reimburse the owner $500 for each claim they make if they prevail. So you've kind of got a fixed universe of potential expense. It might be a couple thousand to defend it with an attorney if you choose to go that way. It may be 500 or a couple multiples of 500 if they file multiple claims. You've got to ask yourself, do we want to submit that claim to insurance and have the mark on our insurability and maybe the risk that we can't get insurance or that our deductible goes really high? So I have a number of clients that have $50,000 deductibles. They pay the first $50,000 on any D&O claim, which will pay for almost every D&O claim that comes along. It begs the question of, is that actually insurance? It's catastrophic insurance, I suppose, but mostly you're now self-insuring for any D&O claims you may have. Um, I've had a rash lately of fair housing complaints. So these are civil rights investigations with the Arizona Attorney General's office. And similarly, um, there's not a lot of risk necessarily to these. There's sort of a fixed universe of potential costs that you might incur. And clients are having to make the hard decision. Do we want to notify D&O for this? Or do we want to just bear the cost of this ourselves to keep a better insurance claims history? Um, I don't envy you having to make those decisions. And there's a lot of uncertainty still in the market. How bad will it be if you make one claim like that, unfortunately, you won't know until next year, and your broker might not tell you much other than it depends on how the claim plays out, right? If it settles after the insurer pays out 2 or 3 thousand, not a big deal. If they've paid out 100,000 over the course of the year, you might be in for a real rude awakening when your insurance renewal comes around. Um, that being said, you would be glad that you've used insurance if it's cost $100,000. There isn't a great answer here. You're in a catch-22 with insurance these days. Just be aware that if you do have an actual claim that's filed, not just a threat, but an ADRE complaint or a lawsuit has been filed, you're going to have to deliberate and weigh the risks about your insurance claims history and the cost of essentially self-insuring and defending those claims yourself. So you need to carefully plan for insurance. You need to probably, insurance or otherwise, be increasing your assessments. It seems like the hottest topic in the last month. People are planning their budgets for next year and finalizing their assessments and figuring out how much they can increase their assessments. And everyone's being quite surprised to find that their documents have limits that they never expected because they haven't raised assessments in forever. But the cost of everything, including insurance, has gone through the roof, and they need extra money and they don't have it now. Unfortunately, there are only so many ways around that financial crunch if you're in it. And finally, you have to think about what claims you want to make and which ones you want to keep yourself. With that, I'm just about 5 minutes short of the hour, enough time to take any questions you may have or any anecdotes you want to share about horror stories you may have personally witnessed